Welcome to More Thoughts of Our Founders, a podcast for the Higher Education Leadership Foundation. We are practitioners, scholars, administrators, and researchers seeking to find like-minded individuals committed to creating rich cultural capital for the sole benefit of this space. More importantly, we are zealots of this sacred space. Got some really special guests here today. Creating rich cultural capital. Not going to belabor the point. We're going to get right at it. What's going on, party people?
What's up?
How's everybody doing?
Great. Doing good.
Great.
What's up?
How's everybody doing?
Great. Doing
We
good.
want to, first of all, welcome our guests here today. I'm here with how's everybody doing? Melva Williams, founder of the Higher Education Leadership Foundation. First of all, welcome, and also here with two of our special guests, none other than the president, founder of the Higher Education Leadership Foundation, Bennett College. First of all, welcome, Suzanne Walsh. Here with two of our special guests, none other than the president, Dr. Hakeem Lucas, president and CEO of Virginia Union University. Welcome, Suzanne Walsh. Got a little playback going. Give us a second. Two of our special guests, none other than the president, Dr. Hakeem Lucas, president and CEO of feedback is gone.
Look at you running. He's also, everybody, for those of you that are watching this, I will say this about my friend, President Felton. He also is not only the president of Wiley College, so thank you, brother, but he is also our engineering manager, which is why you hear the feedback. He's also running the engineering board, but he does a phenomenal job.
Yeah, Greg Dees. Yeah. Greg Dees is fortunately here with us to help this
Helping.
Out. This is a whole new setup. I kind of like the microphone and a individual in front of me.
Yes.
Technology is what it is, and we are who we are. And we are here to have, I think, a really important conversation. Again, I want to welcome Hakeem Lucas, president and CEO of Virginia Union University, and Suzanne Walsh, president of Bennett College. Really lucky to have both of them. I consider them friends and scholars. If you didn't hear me earlier, Melva Williams, who's the vice chancellor of Southern University New Orleans, as well as Southern University Shreveport right now, running the interim capacity, is a founder of H.E.L.F, and she's joining us today again to have this conversation. And really, this conversation is asking a very serious question that was precipitated by Rona, the global pandemic. And we're having discussions about COVID-19 and the HBCU. And the question posed today is whether or not now is a time to reimagine the higher education model, the business model. And I think these two great minds are, in their previous lives, dealt with business on a variety of different levels. And I think they come in at their respective institutions at a great time too, because they're new. They get to, really look at what's going on. But reimagining the space is something that happens when an environmental scan happens, when a new team comes. Now you throw in the global pandemic, and we now get a chance to not only look at what is operating right or what may not be operating most efficiently, but we get a chance to ask the question, what next? What can we do now? And so I think we will start with Suzanne first and asking, first of all, how are you?
Thanks for asking. I'm doing well. I'm trying to not ask anybody how they're doing because I decided we're all like in the same boat. I read this article that said, ask people other questions like, what am I interrupting? Or like, how was your day?
Yeah.
Um, I do feel like my answer, otherwise my answer to how are you doing? It's like, just like you. But
Yeah.
I do appreciate
How's your, what are we interrupting today then? What are we interrupting?
great question. Running college. Today we have had an exciting day talking about actually exactly what this topic is for today. You know, what is the reimagined business model? How do we think about the fall semester in different ways than we came into this? And then also we are in the midst of, because everyone knows about Bennett College, we are in the midst of applying for our alternative accreditation. So we have been in deep in our accreditation application for tracks. So it's also an opportunity to help us rethink things, because when you go through that kind of process,
Yeah.
you know, in parallel with Rona, as you call her, with
Yes.
COVID-19, it really helps actually.
Cool.
Well,
Right.
Dr. Walsh, I have a quick question. Can you take us back to, Corona happened to your college? How did you get to this point? So maybe walk us through, and then I think that'll give us some fodder for the upcoming conversation. Was there anything in particular that you did differently? How did you approach, the crisis?
Well, I think part of what's interesting is, I came in August of 2019 and came in after an incredible fundraising campaign by my predecessor, Dr. Dawkins, where the college raised $9.6 million in 60 days. And so our financial challenges have been front page news for a while. Our financial challenges are the only challenge that we have with our accreditation. And I say all of this just to give context. So we're still accredited by SACS, and at the same time, we are pursuing this alternative accreditation while we work through the courts. And what I think is important about that is, because of that financial status, because of that accreditation status, we had already been planning for a decline in enrollment for the fall, just because we were in this precarious position. We had already been trying to rethink our financial model because we had to. And so when Corona hit, it really just said, okay, everything we had already been focusing on now has to be amplified. But in some ways, we may have been a little bit better positioned, weirdly, because these things were already top of mind. Now, were we ready to go remote and put everybody, in virtual learning environments? No. But some of those other pieces are things we've been planning for a while. So when I say, what are you interrupting? We're still kind of working that path. And now we've added on to it. How do we think about the public health implications of COVID-19?
Yeah, so I think the first question that I'd like to pose is, what model do we believe we're operating now, right? There's this general or anecdotal saying that there are two models associated with the HBCU, the church model and the business model. Dr. Lucas, can you talk to me about first your understanding of what is meant when one says, we're running a church model over here, or they're running a church model? What's your understanding of church model business model, or the overall higher ed model that is analogous to our institutions, understanding that we're not monolith, right? But our space is associated with one or two of those, I think. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to you, to Dr. Williams, to everyone for the invitation, of course, to be on the panel with President Walsh, and just the great work that she's doing down in Greensboro is amazing. Well, you know how it is with anything that is faith-based or faith-centric in the African-American community. To run the business like a church on one side denotes this notion of family and interaction and work and warmth and the necessity of presence and closeness. But on the other side, it often conflicts with the business parts of an organization that usually go with the theme of employment, how performance is preferred over relationships, how people get jobs, how they're placed, and how relationships sometimes supersede productivity. And so oftentimes in our spaces, when we talk about the HBCU world, because the church is often, particularly for private HBCUs, is so ingrained into the culture. Yeah. And not only does the chapel take the central part of our landscape and our architecture, but sometimes it also overflows into our business decisions.
You know, what's fascinating is that there was an article some 2 years ago where a very strong pastor, and I can't think of his name, cautioned the church from wanting to run a business model, run the church as though it were a business model. And it's fascinating because some of the things that you said were in line with the mission of our institutions, right? Not necessarily the church. Even the publics have, this mission that really transcends just educating people. It's about the wholeness of them. So it's fascinating how there's almost this negative connotation for individuals and the church model, belief. And the church is saying, no, we don't want to run the church like a business. And I think, sandwiched in there is this notion that both are great, but it is a matter of dosage, I guess, or balance. I guess it's a matter of balance. You want to add anything to that, Susan?
I mean, I think, so this is getting back to our application for this alternative accreditation, and tracks, the C stands for Christian. And what's been really interesting is that we've had to revisit our faith statement as a college as part of this application process. And in so doing, I think we realized that we had actually, I think, deviated in some ways from our Wesleyan tradition or our United Methodist connections. And so when we had to revisit that faith statement and say, well, who are we today and how are we connected to the United Methodist Church? I think we actually found it to allow us to be more inclusive and expansive than the way that the previous iteration of the faith statement had been written. So I think it's been very interesting for us to revisit. And I think there's a church nearby who is a major contributor to our Stand With Bennett campaign, Mount Zion, and that particular church has no debt. And the pastor there had an approach which was really all about financial literacy for the church writ large. Members. I think we're just seeing a very interesting evolution of churches and the faith community to think in a more holistic way, perhaps, about business, about faith, and what's the intersection between the two. So I've been following a lot of what they're doing. And I think it's really informative. The last thing I'll just say is that I think someone should correct me on this, but I feel like part of what happens sometimes in kind of a faith-based way, and that's why the Mount Zion is so interesting to me is we think it's okay to carry debt. There's always a building fund. And he said, we're just not going to keep doing that. We're going to pay cash when we need to pay cash. And I think that has impacted us as HBCUs. And one of our speakers for Founders Day talked to us about, we should own our HBCUs as a community. It's the one asset that African Americans should own, and we don't.
Yeah.
We don't really own them because of that debt. And so that's when you talk about business model and faith and church, I'm still trying to even make sense of it for myself, but I think there is some historical piece that we can untangle or maybe deconstruct and reconstruct in the modern context.
Yeah, I think before you jump in, Melva, I just wanted to say, I think you're right, Suzanne, but we did own, we were unencumbered in a lot of places, but when you talk about fiscal support and starting even with the mission of the privates, you start there, they were teaching schools. And so the capacity to give and to keep up with the changing times, I think was the pressure. But I do believe, again, nuanced in that, everything rolls back to leadership and decisions. And I think if there were strong decisions being made like the pastor did to say, hey, financial literacy is a hallmark of who we are, and doing things in a strong fiscal way, I think you find institutions and organizations that mirror the ethos of the leader. And sometimes you inherit those things, but most times it is it's a culture that has been created. And that puts us in the predicaments that we find ourselves in oftentimes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Herman. And I guess my question now is to you, Dr. Lucas, in listening to Dr. Walsh's commentary, how have you been able to, or how are you addressing the juxtaposition between faith, mission, business, and coronavirus? And going forward, because all of those things have to get on the train and get on the bus, because there are stakeholders that are
counting on
saying, hey, yes, absolutely. We want this, and in this world of virtual meetings and all of that, how are you putting all of that in the gumbo pot and taking it forward into whatever our new normal may be? And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Lucas, and then I'd like you, Dr. Walsh, to chime in as well. No, that's loaded.
No, I think what President Walsh is saying is absolutely right. That the first issue we have to deal with is preparedness. And so it was good to know and to hear from her that what could have been a negative situation was actually a runway to dealing with a COVID-19. I think that all of us who are trying to reinvent our universities and prepare them for 21st century education have already started the conversation on our campuses on who do we need to be in order to survive, and not just survive, but move from sustainability into some type of strategic growth. I think when you talk about that, it was also good to hear that she is also dealing with the notion of what role will faith play in the future of her institution. Mm-hmm. I think we all have dealt with that, particularly at Virginia Union University, to have some of the greatest preachers alive and who historically have led, particularly in the Baptist tradition, and now even moving into a more Pentecostal areas, and even in partnership with the United Methodist Church through the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology. We are very, very clear that leadership across African-American sectors are important to do. And so faith for us is expressed through the term spiritual formation. And so the necessity to cling on to the fact that there's something more powerful than ourselves, whether you believe it to be collective consciousness or the ancestors or you put a name to it in a Judeo-Christian or faith. The point is simple, that we all are using faith as a lens to grow ourselves towards a deeper level of servitude. And it is that growth of a service-minded individual, a servant leader, that then allows us to take our personal values, our personal ideals, our personal missions and standards, and to infuse them into the institutions that we serve through our missions, our visions, our core values, and ultimately our strategic approach to the work. So how do we become servant leaders ourselves and then create servant organizations? And I think that is the work. What we do know is that COVID-19, missionary Rona, Dr. Rona, however we want to refer to her, that Dr. Rona,
trouble causing
missionary.
I'm just saying that Rona. Well, you know, Pastor Rona is coming with a prophetic message.
Yes.
And the prophetic message that she's bringing to us is that you better learn how to do your business in the midst of unexpected trials and tribulations. And, you know, you have to learn how to serve people when everyone is scared. You need to serve people when you can't touch them. You need to serve people when they might not have a computer on March 1st, but you better teach them some way you can by April 1st. It's teaching us how to be agile. It's teaching us how to be quick. It's teaching us how to be creative. It's teaching us to not allow the spirit of folk who don't want to change, don't want to do things different to hold us back. It's putting the less fortunate in front of us again and helping us to realize that, yes, Black lives matter, but also Black lives can also be invisible in times of national crises and global pandemic. And so how do you carry the burden of people of color outside of the classic constructs that normally will allow us to be, if you will, comfortable in our settings? And so Pastor Rona has made us uncomfortable without a B3 organ.
She was a spoon. She stirred a pot.
She
was a spoon.
You know, and I think the most important thing about it, my last statement, is that finally, through Corona, our majority private and public institutions understand the value of HBCUs, not for our, if you will, work with the underprivileged and the underserved, but our ability to be agile and creative and innovative. So now the PWI friends that we have are forced to do what we do every year.
Welcome
to figure it out. Figure it out.
How am I going to do this?
Make a way out of no way.
You know, they're closing or they're pivoting. They're scared. But welcome to what it means to serve people in the midst of crises. And as I said all the time, you know, social distancing, we've been doing social distancing since 1619. I mean, we've had to teach people and not be lynched. We've had to teach people and through Jim and Jane Crow. We've had to teach people in the basements of the churches. We had to teach people when it was illegal. Social distancing isn't new to us. We've had to deal with teaching you remotely in many different ways.
See how gifted Lucas is. He went from preaching to
shout right now
advocacy. I mean, like, and on point, right?
That's
like
right.
all of that is precisely on point. COVID is real, but there's so many blessings in this tragedy. And as an administrator, one of them is that the boogeyman has been defeated. And the boogeyman is that thing called the internet and the computer and teaching online and online degree programs. Right? For so long, we resisted the notion of doing that. And in a day, people had to adapt and do things that they didn't want to. And I think really at the end of the day, before I turn this over to Suzanne, that to me speaks to the resiliency of who we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
That shows you just a little bit about the spirit of our institutions. Suzanne?
I mean, I can't really follow Dr.
Oh,
Lucas.
you have to. You have
Yes.
I was just going to turn off my camera
And just say right on.
and
This
leave.
was fun. We're
Yeah.
out.
and I feel fine.
Let me ask you this then, Suzanne. When we talk about business models now, or the models that we're operating in, it is no secret that they're not all fine. We're not all fine. Our HBCUs are not all fine, right? And you're not antithetical to loving them because you make that statement. And so the question is what models are working? What are some um, threads between the successfuls, quote unquote, the those that have the appearance of being successful? What do you think some of the common threads of those institutions are that are not found in the institutions that are, quite frankly, managing challenges?
Well, I mean, you used a key word there, though. I mean, when you say those that appear to be successful,
Appear.
so there's a big difference between those who appear to be successful and those who are successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the appearance piece is having people who are really great storytellers and story sellers. And there's a difference between a storyteller and a story seller.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think that there are folks who really can sell their story, but when you start to kind of peel back, you would realize, wait a second, it's really not as it appeared. And that's where I think, back to Dr. Lucas's point, that's what's being exposed now, is those people who are great at telling those stories, they're not going to necessarily survive, because you can't survive COVID-19 with a great story. You have to do the real work. And so that's, I think, going to be the challenge. So who's successful? Those who are who are actually successful,
Mm-hmm.
are institutions that don't go it alone. If you think that you can be successful just as an individual institution in your individual context, you're not going to make it. And it doesn't matter whether you are an Ivy League institution or an open access institution. You can't do it alone. And so those who are most successful are those who have great partnerships. It may be with other institutions, it may be with the business community, it may be with the church, but partnerships are the key. And I think some of the things that we're seeing coming out of this, you were talking about, it revealed, our ability to actually work online, do remote learning.
Mm-hmm.
It's also revealing that we can, in fact, have some shared services, right? There's been a lot of resistance, but now, for whatever reason, COVID-19 is more real than all of the other moments that have been threatening to close institutions. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because the volume and everybody's experiencing that same anxiety and the same issues all at once. Whereas, like an institution struggling last year and one 5 years ago, and that's different. But when everybody's in this together, I think it reveals a number of opportunities. But that, shared services, the ability to be able to also like purchase together. We have a couple of things going on.
Purchasing power of a group.
Exactly. But all of these things are things that it's not like nobody brought these up before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, right. Well, and for me, I'm in the Southern University system, which is the only HBCU system in America. So we are accustomed to, having the 5 campuses and the shared services and the shared personnel and the like. So for me, it is an obvious. So specifically, how have you all done that and embraced it? And then the second question I have, and when you talked about partnerships, one of my questions was going to be the economic impact of this. And have you had any conversations with your community delegations, your mayors, your governors, your city council about the economic impact of what could happen come fall? So those two questions for the both of you.
So let's see, the first question
The
was
shared services that
The
we're
shared
doing now at
services, and how
UNCF.
have you embraced it?
Yeah.
You know, how has that been embraced? And is there some trepidation about, you know, that sort of model?
Well, and I'm missing a call, I think shortly, which is for UNCF. A number of us are getting together to, they're offering an opportunity for us to offer some classes, some online classes through another provider. That's something that I think it would have been a lot more difficult for us to move forward on, but now faculty get it for the summer, especially like summer school anyway, but we really do need to make up some time. So I think UNCF is stepping up. We're also, as a women's college, we're also in the Women's College Coalition. The same kinds of things are happening within that group where folks are basically like offering, hey, we have something to bring to the table. And we all kind of figure out how we can maybe use and build on the strengths of some other institutions and what can we share together. And then there's this purchasing, I think, that we're trying to figure out. Is there what are opportunities for that joint purchasing? And in terms of those partnerships with the kind of local,
you know, your mayors, your community, city council, to talk about the economic impact of what could be next.
Well, we're so tiny. So, you know, we're 267 students compared to, on either side of us, A&T, University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Then we have Greensboro College, Guilford College, and Guilford Technical Community College. So we are the smallest in this region. I don't necessarily know that we could have a huge voice in terms of the city and economic impact, but I have shared with our state officials the economic impact that we do have even as a small institution, and really talking with them about what happens when you lose this part of the economy. So we're so tiny, we're outsized in terms of our contribution back to the economy. That's really what I've been talking about mostly, but I like your question because now I'm like, maybe I should talk to the mayor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What about you, Dr. Lucas? Have you been in communication with your city officials and talking about the economic impact of what your college brings?
Well, I think that the first is, you know, the critical question of, you know, how is collaborations and partnerships, how is that working in the HBCU context today? I think President Walsh said it great. You know, UNCF as an organization is also changing to respond to the need from our partnerships in the independent college world. So our associations of independent colleges of Virginia to reaching out across all public and private lines. A number of presidents in the Commonwealth here in Virginia have reached out to me and asking if you need any help and those type of shared services. So, and we've been partnering and trying to do it. I think the question for me and my reflections are, where does the strategic opportunities for HBCUs come into play when you are also mindful of economic development and particularly minority-based business growth in your immediate social context. This is also something that is not new. This is what HBCUs, particularly private HBCUs, have been and have meant to the communities in which they are located and they serve. I am excited because that is something that through COVID, I'm trying to embrace more. I think in the beginning, COVID, it was emergency response. And my focus was singular on what do I do for the students that have selected us and how do I ensure that I meet their need. Once again, that's where that faith comes in that informs our practice. And so for me, it didn't matter how much the federal government gave. It didn't matter what anybody else was doing. I needed to know what our students needed. undergrad and graduate, and what I needed to do to get it. So I know the total need of our students was $4.7 million. And I understood that the federal government was never going to give us enough to meet that need. So the question was, who do I go to when I have to represent students of all ages coming from various places around the nation? And the only place you could really turn to is people who understand your struggle. And that is the minority business community. So when you talk about telling everybody, hey, order from the Black businesses in Richmond. Hey, we want to deal with food delivery. We want to make sure that we're engaged with them, understanding what's happening, talking to the Chamber of Commerce, staying involved and hearing from the mayor, the governor, hearing from, Congressman Bobby Scott is doing just great work on behalf. Senator Warner and all the elected officials are also engaged in doing some great work. But I think the major question for us as we get out of emergency response and move to business continuity, as we call it, and long range planning,
there we go,
is to say, look, we as Virginia Union University must represent the needs of people of color who are immediately in what I like to call our ethno system. And so I know there are some families that are suffering that I need to do more for. I was trying to advocate and do some advocacy yesterday for why private HBCUs cannot be involved in the research dollars that are coming out from the various U.S. federal departments and programs. We want to get involved. Testing is going to be important. And so as we look at how our faculty, how our staff get engaged in the community, they come from the community. It was very important for me to figure out ways to deal with the underpaid workers and just to keep them employed and finding a way to make sure that they can work some hours. So, hey, we're going to cut this grass. Put your mask on, but cut the grass because that's my social justice. I'm keeping you employed to keep food on your table. Yes, we know kids are going to run through the campus and they shouldn't be doing it. But at the end of the day, we'll correct them, but we won't arrest them. And so that's very important about our approach to the work. My last comment is around this notion of learning innovation. Here's what we do know. We know that Harvard is 383 years old. We know Yale, 316 years old. Princeton, 274 years old. Virginia Union, 155 years old. There is a certain, if you will, benefit of longevity and learning how these majority institutions who, as President Walsh says rightly, are if you will, creating narratives about their response is very different from ours. As we are, growing and all HBCUs are growing through creating strategies that will allow us to be like our predominantly white counterparts. We're learning that you can do as much as you want to collaborate. You can serve the community as much as you need. But if you're not meeting the need of your individual student population, if you're not making sure that you are beginning innovation with a student need, then we've missed the boat.
So, and to that very point, I have a question for you, and it centers around how you're working with the academic affairs folks and your faculty to, or are you considering rethinking workforce needs and addressing those, contact tracing and healthcare fields, technology-based jobs? Are you leveraging or finding yourself thinking toward reframing the entire, some of your offerings, or not the entire campus offerings, but to leverage some of those things and address the workforce needs in those areas? You mentioned, there you go.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Everything you said, I'm sure I share the same position as President Walsh. There's nothing that cannot be touched. There are no sacred cows. I think
especially when you mentioned the research dollars, because that's where so that's what really made it. Yeah.
What we have to realize is that more money was put into finding a cure than dealing with the people who are suffering from the virus. So while I appreciate the CARES Act and the dollars that have been generated because of who we are, I also want to be a part of the dollars, the other 2 trillion, and the new telemedicine and the new businesses that are being created, and this new economy that's coming and resurrecting allied health. And so for us, I appreciate our provost, Dr. Goodrich, and all those who are watching from VU TV. Thank you so much. I've seen all of you. Thank you for the texts. But I'm very clear. We have to be involved in allied health. Yeah. We have to get involved in this telemedicine. We have to find a way to find a cure, not just to corona, but to other issues that affect the health and well-being of people of color at a tremendously disproportionate amount, right? And I know our faculty are organizing for it. The truth is we're going through a whole redesign of our academic affairs unit. What we realize, they're creating five new academic schools, have 10 graduate degree programs that also started, 3 new bachelor's degree, and then associate's degree. Workforce is everything, right?
Yeah. Would you embrace short-term training? I know liberal arts colleges, made. So, and I'd love to hear Dr. Walsh too, to see, would you embrace?
You have to.
Learning. Yeah. Yes.
You have to. I mean, the point is, the reality is, and I think Dr. Makola Abdullah says this, president of Virginia State, he says it very well. He says, look, at the end of the day, when people lose their jobs in the African-American community, we're talking about the parents of the children that have come. And so, they don't have the opportunity. So some will have to work and learn at the same time. And how do we do that? Is to dispel all of these notions of our certain, if you will, desire to be the best, but restrict academic offerings to certain programs because we believe that validates who we are, other than whether the community college. I'll turn it to President Walsh.
I mean, I think that, so the last time I was in higher ed, which was like 20 years ago, I was at a community college and my area was workforce and economic development. So the notion of short-term training and that is just, that's how I grew up. And so I think about that as being important. But at the same time, I think we have to figure out what makes us distinct. Yeah. So we also can't be like, oh, me too. Like we're also doing that. And so I think if we do anything related to short-term training or anything like that, we have to do it in a context where we say, but what do we have to offer?
Mission driven.
Because otherwise, as I said, we're one of a number of institutions right in this area. Anybody could offer those things. Having worked nationally, everybody has the need for nurses. Yeah. But should we all be training nurses? What can we do that brings culturally specific and relevant training? And if we can't, then we shouldn't be doing it. So I think part of the redesign of the academic model for us is twofold. Number one, it's understanding who our current students are. And as I always say to our faculty and staff, it's not who our students used to be. It's not who we want the students, you wish. It is who our students are at the moment. Let's make sure that we can serve the students that we have at the moment. And that also means redoing the semester. 16 weeks is deadly. Who can stay interested for 16 weeks in anything?
I had to do it, so they have to do it as well. We're not covering anything.
So I last semester.
That's how it's always been.
Right. And so last semester I said to faculty, we need to really consider going to block scheduling because the students that we have bring a lot with them. And from a mental health perspective, trying to imagine that I can keep it together for the whole semester is a lot. 16 weeks is a lot. But if I knew I would get a break and I could switch subjects and I can focus on one subject or 2 subjects, there's multiple ways to think about block scheduling. But when I first brought it up, the first response that we had was, first of all, everybody hated it and hated me. And then it was, I've looked it up, and the only places that do block scheduling are high schools and community colleges. There are no HBCUs that do it. I don't care that there are no HBCUs, but that's not actually a data point. But I say that because part of, I think, our challenge in reimagining and reinventing is it's very difficult, I think, a lot of times for an HBCU to say we're going to be first and only. A lot of times we take a very safe approach and say, well, who else is doing it? So now what happened is I brought this up in the fall to do block scheduling. Now the PWIs, they are,
Already
that has become
full throttle.
point that they're doing block scheduling.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so thinking about, okay, again, like, but what can we do with that? How does it support the students that we have? How does it help support their learning? Quite frankly, also we did a faculty and staff meeting the other day, and I said to faculty, so we've now been remote for, I think at that point, we're remote for like 6.5 weeks. And I said, if we have to be remote in the fall, can you imagine doing what you just did? Like, you're not even done. You still have and they were all, nope.
Yeah.
So it's not just for students, it's for faculty and staff mental
Sure.
health. So anyway, I think it's the moment to reimagine what we offer, how we offer it, and what is distinct and unique. And if we can't identify that, then we really shouldn't be offering it.
Yeah, higher education, the industry is at an inflection point right now. There's no question about it. And public and private, white and black institutions are tracking, and if not yet being impacted by this tectonic shift that has occurred, and it's causing us to not only look at who we serve, but how we serve them as well. We know that there are, for HBCUs, there are but a few points of revenue stream, right? If you're lucky, you have the endowment, but you certainly have, if you're lucky, you have the trifecta: the endowment, auxiliary services, and revenue from tuition and fees. Most are operating on tuition and fees. Why I believe that you guys talked a great deal about a lot of good things that I'm really happy about, because I know that, again, it's really hard to talk about the good stuff that has happened with Corona, but there are some things that have happened that needed to happen a time ago. The shared services piece, right? People, mostly the distressed assets, have been talking about, hey, we need help from our big brothers and sisters. Let's help and create a buying power that allows us to walk up into Bar and say, build a platform for us, not like the one that you're selling to these multi-billion-dollar institutions, but build something for us that doesn't cost us what it costs us now. If the collective did that, I think things would be completely different. COVID-19 is nothing new under the sun by way of stressors that should have forced us to do things a different way, right? There have always been stressors, none like COVID-19. Let's be very clear about that. But schools have been plagued with financial hardships for a long time. And we and sisters keepers, yet we find them in spaces where there is a need. Outside of the collaboration, outside of the shared services, and outside of these three things that I think are really the drivers, the revenue streams, um, the the endowment, the auxiliary service, and tuition and fees. How do we reimagine the model so that we find ourselves in a space where we can be sustainable first, and then that other word that I'm afraid to use that Hakeem Lucas said is where we should all be thriving to go, far from sustainable, but a different place. How do we reimagine the three sources? And some of us should probably leave the endowment piece alone because that's not there. But it goes back to reimagining what you have. Are we looking at the educational enterprise in a space that says education, and this is unpopular, but education, kids are not coming to school to be teachers anymore. Do we get rid of that and go into logistics? Alabama A&M has a logistics program, a master's in it, that is bananas. And students are leaving there making $80,000, $90,000. How do we look at our regions and make something that is malleable to the region for our students, and the institution to build upon? How do we do that? And now the time to do that, because there are a lot of balls that are juggling, but is now the time to reimagine the current business model that we're operating under. That is not a rhetorical question. I would like to pause.
It's the I'm finding my mute button delay. That's what it is.
Especially Hakeem Lucas. He's like, yeah, what is that button? I got stuck on one. Hey, where's that
That's
button?
all. That's all. Just hang on with this.
Well, here's what I'm struggling with a little bit. And this is going to be heretical. I think that, yes, we need to care about what the economy needs. And I'm a fan of like logistics. I mean, I get all of those things. And yet I'm very fearful that we're going to throw out the core of the liberal arts. So how do you marry both? Because ultimately, when you look at the jobs that the big tech companies, for example, post, while yes, there is a set of them that are about the tech skills, there's a lot that when you look at what's required, all the other stuff that we at least claim, I'm not saying we're nailing it all the time, but we claim is part of the liberal arts experience. And so I'm trying to figure out, what I really want to do is reinvent the liberal arts for the 21st century. I don't quite know what that means yet, but I know that it is something about not becoming so insular that I think that only liberal arts matter. But I also think that it's not about only STEM or STEAM matters. I don't know what it is yet, but now is the time to think about that, because the longevity of people in terms of their careers who really understood what they had and embraced their liberal arts backgrounds are much more successful over time. They keep growing, whereas there is a plateau. I think I have to double check, but somebody did this research where they looked at, there's a plateau of people who focus on technical skills, and they do very well. Like out of the gate, they make a lot, but they plateau faster than people who have that liberal arts education. It has to do with the adaptability and the ability to learn across, the lifespan. So that's why I was pausing, and I wasn't really that interested in finding my mute button.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think about, well, there's something to be said about being able to adjust to the new context, because we can't predict that far out what the new jobs are going to be. So it's really like, what are the skills more than prepping somebody for a job?
Yeah, it's laying the foundation for a viable future, right?
Yeah.
And academic portfolio optimization is a fancy word of saying, how do you look at mission, prestige, and profit, right? How do you do that? And I think that's what you just are to be the hot stuff, and marry that with the backbone of Americana, really, to be quite honest with you. How do you do that? And we know that the visibility and the efficacy of programs stops a lot of us from changing programs, because history, because of tradition, etc. But a future-proof business is really, in our space, is predicated on the academic portfolio. I don't care what anyone says. It's about offerings, and that's the reason why people come to institutions. It's about what do you have that I can use to take me to where I want to go.
Absolutely. So I have a question as it you relates to
Oh, I
going
want to
into.
jump in on that
Oh,
one.
you do?
Hold
Yeah,
on,
go
Dr.
ahead.
Oh,
Double
that,
dutch.
He
I don't
found the
want.
mute
Come
button.
on into
He
this room.
found the mute button.
You
Found
better.
the mute button.
Hey,
Hey,
double dutch in here before we
you
go to
know,
this next question.
well, yeah, no, I think that that is so important as we look at where do we come out of this crisis and how are HBCUs stronger post-COVID?
Mhm.
And I think the answer to that is how do we serve our communities based on what we have discovered are the gaps and the dilemmas socially, economically, politically that the communities that we are missioned to serve, African Americans and other ethnic minorities, that they need. And what we see is, particularly in my perspective and line of sight here at Virginia Union, is that we have chosen to be, through my strategic work, guardians of generational wealth. And let's be very clear that we have to be responsible for ensuring generational wealth transfer from the gains that have been made over the years.
Yes.
What we're clear about is that what we've been able to achieve through this COVID is because of the exposure to the political process of graduates from HBCUs. Advocacy in the political realm, whether it's from the mayor's levels to the representatives from the states that we serve, more have graduated, and as they were exposed through whether it was liberal arts or the social justice or community activism that have inspired a generation of HBCU alum, that is paying dividends for us. We have to replicate this into other sectors, right? So we need our alum in the financial world. We need our alum in the science world. We need our alum in medical worlds. We need our alum in logistics. We need our alum in every sector that the economy, if you will, has the ability to empower and to ensure the next generation can survive. But it's also not just economic wealth either. There is a social wealth that is also needed to be transferred. There is also political wealth. There is also a certain spiritual wealth that needs to be transferred from generation to generation. And we are the curators, but not just curators, but we are the ones who also help people conceive new ideas of who and what they can be. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it is the programs, our academic programs that are aimed not at HBCUs for simple discovery, but you are here for 4 years to strategically prepare yourself to take over your mama and your daddy, if you have one, but somebody's business that you will inherit. If you are coming for the first time and you are not inheriting anything directly from your ancestors or from your lineage, you're inheriting a cultural phenomenon. And that cultural phenomenon is a standard that you're going to use this entrepreneurship degree, you're going to build something. And if nobody left something to you, you're going to leave something to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And the conversation, I think, from COVID increases our necessity of understanding that our institutions must be committed to ensuring that generations who come after us don't have to wait for a successful Black man to pay off their debt at a graduation.
Wow, that's phenomenal. I love to hear how I think Herman is wanting to comment, but were you about to say something else?
I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions. One, do we believe that the leaders of these institutions have to evolve? Mindset, mind, thought. I'm very cautious in treading because I don't want to give the appearance. But the question is whether or not we evolve from a church model to a business model. How important is it that we move from that space of the leaders just evolving to this space of the cultural and institutional norms that preclude us from stepping out and being the first, if you will, the inability to have our final decision-making processes guided through a business model, one that takes the granular data and provides transparency for our stakeholders, like being able to draw the nexus between expenses, revenues, and outcomes, right? Those are, I think, predictors and indicators that create transparency, that invariably creates buy-in. And we've had in the past this notion that all of the information is up here. And I don't know, at the top, right? The top pyramid, or those are the decision makers. In order for us to evolve or a business model to move, how important is it for that granular transparency for everyone to know? And is that even necessary for everyone to know about revenues, how we generate it, how we use it, and how we tie that to outcomes? Is that important? Is that necessary? That's a quasi shared governance question? But is that important for our institutions to move into the next wave post COVID in a space or in a way that says we went through that and we're stronger now because we reimagined, we thought, we tweaked, we did this, we did that?
I found my buzzer quicker this time.
No, you didn't. Somebody else found your buzzer.
Yeah, we
You
see
did
some
not find it.
hands.
We see hands and parties
People
and all kind of
trying
stuff
to-
going on over there.
All right. Well, President Walsh, if you want to go, I saw yours. If you want to go first, okay. This is another great conversation, right? And at the end of the day, there are many organizations and African American based cultural and, if you will, business orgs, nonprofit and profit, who are doing very well, right? A lot of churches have shown the same agility that our universities have shown, right? Or majority, let me say not every, but a majority of churches are currently streaming online, and they may not have had that capacity pre-COVID. And so I think that there's some resiliency being shown across the board. What I have come to understand more now than I did prior to COVID is that there is a certain level of respect, a certain level of adherence, a certain level of love. And that's, I think, a good word to use. A love for the people who work at HBCUs for the institutions that they work for. Mm-hmm. And I've just seen people do some amazing things over the last 60 days, and just being able to learn about people and who they are and their levels of commitment have just, and many times, particularly those who are in student services, they're like first responders. And to watch them in a first responder way to engage students is just an amazing thing. Yeah. And I think it's that love that I think pushes us to say, well, if we're going to consider a business model, the business model, I believe, has to be a bottom-up approach. I mean, you know, the days and times where you can sit as the leader and think that people are going to do something because you told them what to do, particularly like in my case, if you don't have gray hair or if you have a little hair, that doesn't fly anymore. You will have to, you'll have to, as a leader, if the goal of a business model is to grow the business in the three ways that were identified before, right? Endowment, auxiliary enterprise, and tuition and fees, then you have to be able to share with folks the case for why they should give. And you have to be able to share with folk the reason why they should trust you through stewardship. Unfortunately, a lot of the attacks that come at successful leaders particularly in the past and currently, are all around how you manage, right? Finances and how you manage your own life, right? And the decisions that you make. So if those decisions are going to be scrutinized, then those decisions should be analyzed. And so I know it's the analyzation and those forms of analyses that allow me to work with the staff to understand where they are, not just from a perspective of instruction, but from the perspective of directing them to achieve various goals that we all know are needed today. The other side of it is this whole notion of the student as a person who is on one side a customer, but on the other side, this sometimes a willing, oftentimes unwilling participant in their own self-transformation. And so we have to resolve that too, right? Because we know there will be some non-traditional, as we used to call them, older students who will be coming back. And so you have to listen to them. No matter what their age is, they are the best group in this market that can tell us what their needs are and designing a business practice around it. In summary, for me, one, you have to be able to share what you are doing and to articulate it and bring people along. But at the same time, you got to be open as a leader today to learn as you lead and sometimes learn faster than you lead. One thing that we know is nobody knew what to expect March 1. We still don't know what is the future going to be, but we've learned to walk together. And I think that begins some of the elements of the business model that is going to emerge.
Yeah. I think a business model has to have value proposition, resources, processes, and a profit formula. That I agree with that. That's not mine. This book I read while I was in school, Disrupting College. I know Christensen is one of the authors, and there may be 3 or 4, but that model was really, it was used to describe how online education really works. And I think because everyone is on this whole notion of online education, distance education, and hybrid, those things are not all the same. So people have to be really clear about that. They're not all the same. You have an educational program that's offered online. That's an online degree program. You might have a hybrid, and you may have some online learning. They're all different. But this book talked about what had to be present for there to be a viable business model. And then a lot of times, I think that that's where our institutions differentiate ourselves if we can clearly articulate, as Susan said, who we are, not selling a story, but the value. And that everything starting with the value proposition. The special sauce is beautiful. Yes, people come to our institutions for the special secret sauce. But the special secret sauce does not make for a car note to be paid or a mortgage to be sustained, right? And so I know that our colleagues, we talk all the time about now it's there. What else? What else other than homecoming at HBCUs? And I'm not suggesting that that's all we're about, because we are making brick with straw and we're doing well with our graduates. But those 4 things have to be present, I believe. How do you guys feel that value proposition, the resources, the processes, and this profit formula, which is last in their motto, but arguably the most important, right? Because it has to make sense from a fiscal standpoint. How do you guys square up with Christensen's motto of a higher education and being a disruptor in higher education and using that as a business model?
I'm gonna try to find.
Y'all always pause on my day.
I have a book over there that I have to go find that I prefer to Christensen's book. That I'll be back on camera in a second. But I do. I wanted to come back to this notion about what kind of lead, because there's a certain kind of leader that has to be engaged in this kind of environment. And I think back to the notions about the sort of the church model and the HBCU model and the intersections there with, and I'm out of my depth here, so it's really more of a question, but how presidents of HBCUs are perceived, are we perceived in the same way that people look at pastors? And I ask that because, like, what does leadership mean in the Black community? What's our definition? What has it been? What does it mean to be in these roles? Because I think when you apply whatever you believe it means to be a leader in a church to being the leader of a college or a university, that's tricky. It's very tricky. And I'm often surprised by, we love a title. You know, in the Black community, we love a title. I get so much, people are so nice to me. You know, I wasn't a president one week and then I was a president the next week. And there's just, you know, I've been a funder, right? So I also remember, like, I wasn't a funder and then I was a funder, but even then, not the same reverence. There is a reverence and almost like an unwavering support. And I think what that allows us to get away with is maybe not evolving as leaders in the ways that we should. And so I think when I think of, like, what are the ways we need to evolve as leaders and push ourselves, I think Dr. Lucas talked about a lot of those ways, but I also think it's understanding business principles, like being really, really clear about understanding the world of business. And a value proposition is just where we have to start.
Yeah.
And we can't be afraid of it. We can't be afraid of looking like a new model of leader, which is what Dr. Lucas is. Like he said, he doesn't have the gray hair. He doesn't, you know, what does that mean? What does that new model of Black leader look like today? And we've got to push that, because the disruption comes from those who are bringing that new flavor, that whole new perspective. And I think one of the other things that's important is that a leader's role, especially in a crisis, is to narrate the crisis. And so what has to happen is that you can't presume that your team is understanding exactly what's happening just because you do. And you have to narrate some things that to you seem very obvious. You still have to spell that out. So, you know, in the classic form, it's the Greek chorus. The Greek chorus is constantly chiming in and saying, well, here, this is what that meant. This is what that meant. And it's not that you always know or got it or you have it right, because even the Greek chorus can ask a question.
Yes.
The chorus can say, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'm struggling with that. But that role is absolutely essential, because if you don't bring that skill set, then you're not bringing people on that journey with you. And people have to be walked, because they don't know what they don't know how to make sense of it. Your job is to be that sense maker.
Yeah.
And so in that, you know, Michael Sorrell, you know, somebody I talk to often, the president of Paul Quinn, and I learned from him that he talked more about kind of the finances of Paul Quinn up front with faculty and staff. And I was like, that is fascinating, you know, because as an independent college, we don't necessarily do that. And so I worked with our CFO and I was like, okay, what is our revenue per student? Because we're tuition driven. What is our revenue per student? And now I am constantly saying to faculty and staff, okay, what's our revenue per student? Okay, and how many students do we have? And how much does that equal for this year? Mm-hmm. Because if we don't start helping to narrate the finances and narrate the, like, here's our starting point, it's very difficult for people to make sense of it. Everybody's not diving into the finances. Yeah. So I think that narration is really important. I'm going to go get that book. I'll bring it back to the screen.
Okay, so I would present, just because I know everybody who's listening and watching, and everybody wants to learn and read more. There's a guy by the name of Fred Kaufman. It starts with the letter K. Fred Kaufman talks about conscious business and how do you increase value through values, right? How do you increase the profitability by what you bring to the organization through the core values of the business? He also has another one that is a good one called the Meaning Revolution. And if you look at those two books, it'll shape a little bit about what I'm thinking about as far as being a proponent myself of transcendent leadership, which is a take more so beyond transformational leadership. And the core tenet of transcendent leadership is that if you have read, I'm sure, Brene Brown talking about daring greatly and all that, and just saying, what does it mean when you're in the arena and how you perform in the arena where you don't throw up your shields, but you allow your authentic self to be developed and evolved in the presence of others that are seeking your good, but also seeking ill of you. And I think my experiences as a president have been very public, the good moments and the trying moments. And my survival has been because I've trusted the people around me without knowing them. I trusted them with my authentic self. And to say, I'm going to be who I am in the midst of COVID or in the midst of commencement. I'm going to be who I am, whether we're at homecoming or whether we're having a difficult political discussion. And I'm going to grow with you as I lead you. And I think what this hour calls for are leaders who, as President Walsh said, are not worried about their titles. I'm not worried about how much power I can have. I'm not worried about how reverent you will be to me. I'm concerned about one thing. Are you meeting the needs of the students in the role that you serve?
That's right.
We usually call that word productivity. So I think narrating the crises is key, but it's also introducing to many young leaders and people who will lead with us a new language that at the end of the day, you can love these kids, you can love the students, but if you're not on time to meetings, if you're not fulfilling your key performance indicators, if you're not modeling the behaviors that are necessary, you might have to do that at another institution. Mm-hmm. And, while I want to give you an opportunity to learn, I don't hire people that I have to teach. The teaching is our business. People pay us to learn. So if I pay you, you got to come with something, and I don't mind training you.
I love it.
I just can't teach you. I just can't do that. That's the business. And I think
so it sounds like you're really putting a focus on accountability as well.
Let me do this last sentence. Let me do this last sentence, and I get up off my soapbox.
No, take your time.
I think that what the call of the day is that all of us have to be serious about the fact that our students, in the midst of crises like we've just experienced, even with a degree, are set back 4 years. And our degrees have to represent an accelerator through the social issues, the economic issues that this world and this nation in particular are facing. And so when you talk about leadership today, leadership has changed. We need people who will listen. We need people who will follow. When it comes to, I said it internally, when it comes to emergency response and COVID, I become the general, right? And I become not just the CEO, but I also become the person who is responsible for navigating us through the dark moments. And when that hits, there's a certain disposition that we need around us. And so all of you who are watching, who are leaders, and you become your worst self in the midst of trial and tragedy and challenges, then you're not going to be ready for this moment. You have to become centered. You have to become meditative. You have to become a coach. You have to become a guide to people. But you also have to know who's not going to make it and make these decisions very, very quickly. You have to know where we can invest our limited resource. Where are opportunities? How do we, and this is an important word that is experienced in the religious community that we also need to adapt, and that is discernment. How will you gain a level of discernment to see your way through a storm and not kill the university or the organization through it? Because you can't fire everybody.
Well,
and
what?
You have to be
You're
conscious.
kidding.
And you have to be conscious of the fact that everybody's dealing with something. Everybody's dealing with loss. And how do we grieve and also serve? Grieve and serve, grieve and serve. I'm going back on mute. Amen. Thank you, Lord.
Right
That's
on.
all I have to say.
Well, okay. So Herman talked about the secret sauce of the HBCU, and you know, we have to address this. And each college has this secret sauce. I mean, each one has this special niche and what is the calling card to that institution. So I'm interested, especially with me being the vice chancellor for student affairs and enrollment management at 2 institutions, right? So I want to know, you know, how are you, or if you are sharing some innovative strategies or employing some innovative strategies that showcase some increased value about coming to campus in the fall. You know, having that traditional HBCU experience may be different come fall. So how are you addressing that?
I'm still working on it, but I did get my book. So let me start.
Oh, good. Yeah. Start with your book.
It's called Business Model Generation, and it's by Osterwalder. Well, we can look it up anyway. Can you? Sorry.
there you go.
Absolutely right. That is a great book. That is a great book. It should be go with Peter Senge, and anybody who's looking. Peter Senge is the Dance of Change. And you should also go back to Thomas Kuhn and go get The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, all of you who are looking for paradigmatic struggles in these days and times.
There you have it. Now you know why Hakeem Lucas was on this panel. Simply because we knew he was going to drop some nuggets about reading materials, right? Who knew that you would come and get this rich stuff, President Walsh? Who knew?
I did not. I just thought I was just coming here.
Show and tell.
To
chop it up with us.
You know what? You know what?
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so back to the book, because I think that this question is relevant, because one of the early things, it's not just about the value proposition, but it's customer segments.
Right.
So that's step one. And I think that, again, you know, we have to really be clear about, well, who is our segment? Who's our ideal segment? And I don't know if I've shared this with you, Dr. Felton, but I started to watch our students and started to observe who are the most successful students at Bennett. Not who do we say or who do we think, but like, who really are the students for whom Bennett is the right match, and vice versa. And so Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, that's what I spent thinking about, trying to think about how could I define who our students are. Mm-hmm. And I came up with an idea, which is, I think that Bennett College has the potential to be at the intersection of Wakanda and Hogwarts.
Okay.
I want to hear more. I want to hear more. I want to hear more.
No.
Would I need a wand?
Yes. You definitely would.
And a robe? Because I do like.
Don't forget your blue stone. Don't forget your blue stone.
Harry Potter is I think appropriate. You know, you mix that up with Wakanda, and you got some fire there.
Get that spoon back out.
Hey, you know, it's so interesting. I think that, you know, I definitely don't believe in giving out away the secret sauce, right? But I do believe that I'm rediscovering the beauty and the power of the history of Virginia Union.
Yeah.
I think that there's nothing that I need to recreate. Virginia Union has been persistent. It has a legacy of strong shoulders. I have a great board who I work with, great alum, and all I need to do is learn more about that rich history and legacy and continue to do the one thing that a lot of people don't like to do anymore.
Yeah.
And that's just work. Just do the work. Just work. And I mean, just work. And it just is a great word that I've rediscovered too, partnership.
Yeah.
That to be in partnership with the board. These times, too often we make it through crises and then we're fighting again 5 months later, right? Yeah. And so, to be in partnership with each other and to stay in partnership. So from the board to the alum, to the students, to the faculty, to the staff, to just say, hey, we're all in this together. And I think that the future of Virginia Union will be achieved because we're all now in partnership in a way that we haven't been in partnership before. It just is so critical. I still want to hear some about this Wakanda and this Hogwarts thing, you know.
We're gonna have to meet.
We'll put that on like next week. Should that be?
But I want to say, Hakeem, that what you just said, the reason why Virginia Union will be is because of your leadership. And I really, what you did was went back to a piece that President Walsh, she asked the question was the reverence, this piece about reverence for these leaders. And if I would posit that folk like Dogan, who was here for 48 years, and individuals who have been at your individual institutions, when the reverence, what we are benefactors of is the residual of the work that they did. Those presidents at that time, and some people refer to it as patriarchy at this place, but I think we have to really remember that those presidents were in the community, of the community, and for the community. They were not only just the ivory tower, but they were a place where kids had a place to come in the summer and run across the campuses. They provided shelter in times of needs. I think when you look at the people who are still having that deferential type space for us, they're baby boomers and above, and they are the individuals who remember when the president and the institution were not just sitting in a community and being uber exclusive. They were about the community. And I think that really goes back to what Hakeem said in discovering his institution. And COVID has given me an opportunity to do that as well. And all of us discovering many different things. But I really wanted to just, to try and answer that question as to why. But I am with you. The evolution of the position, I think the position creates the challenges that are here in this present day, create and mandate and necessitate a different type of a leader now. It doesn't mean that that different is deficient or that their difference was deficient. Right now, you can't wear the type of trike cleats that folk wore when they ran back in the 60s. You need some air zooms and all that crazy stuff. So it is just about evolution.
And that's what it is about, brother. I mean, and you hear it. It's not that HBCU presidents haven't talked before. Yeah. It's just, they didn't have the technology so you can see it, hear it, and join into our conversation.
Sure.
I mean, everybody asks me all the time, well, why do you do suits and J's? Well, I said, because Spencer Johnson, MD, said, who moved my cheese? And it's better to have your shoes on and when change comes than to wear them around your neck.
That's right.
And so you better keep your sneakers on. And you need your suit and your tie because you never know when that who moved my cheese moment will come. And these are our learnings. This is our collective wisdom. Ma'at is still real. Yeah. And this nature of harmony and the responsibility of us as leaders and protectors of this community consciousness to begin to foster this. As I said, I love being a part of the fraternity of presidents. And I hope whenever the Lord says my time is done, that all of you will remember the fun that we had while we were also leading through some of the worst times. And I think what is so different is, I know about 39 to 40 presidents. You all are on the phones. Like, I like you all. I'm a fan of your work. I follow you all in social media. And it is the mutual respect that we have. Oh yeah, look at Melvin, look at that. It's just that's just fun. I think that's her advertisement. That's the next president, y'all. She is going to be a president. She just wanted to show you her new face.
Yeah.
No! Can I just make a comment about the
Absolutely.
photo and that about the notion about the history and it's really interesting. So for me, I think it's which presidents led through similar moments in time. So when we first went to working remote and teaching remote, I read a book by one of Dr. Linda Brown called Bells of Liberty. And it's about the gender issues related to the protests in Greensboro back in the day. And really, you know, Bennett Bell, a majority of our students were arrested during those protests in Greensboro. And the president at the time, Willoughby Player, she went to jail to visit the students. She made sure that their homework was brought to them. She really supported the students in their efforts. And when I think about living through difficult times, that's a president that I look to and say, wow, what was she going through? How did she do this? That completely disrupted the campus in ways that, you know, has not been done sort of before or since. And I think whenever we try to talk about the shoulders that we stand on, because I stand on all of those shoulders, but hers in particular, I like going back and say, okay, what was she thinking? What was she writing? What was she saying? But I also think that it's important for us as a community to contextualize history, because sometimes we just say a sentence where we say, well, Bennett is a great place because of our history.
Right.
And we literally just stop there.
Yeah.
We don't talk about what we've done to contribute to history.
Right.
That we continue to be, especially as Black women, marginalized from those national conversations and those historical conversations. So I think we owe it to ourselves to have those conversations with alums, to read. I've been wandering the archives, and then to help, again, tell that complete story, because that's what attracts students, is to be able to see that whole history and to see that through line.
Yeah. There's a gentleman by the name of Rudolph McKissick Jr., who is a graduate of Virginia Union University, who
let the church say amen. Let the church say amen now.
I was getting ready to, when he was closing his sermon, he would say, we're going to cut across the field. And as we cut across the field here, I think there's a question that Melva has that's a little lighthearted. We'll come back and summarize and then give you parting shots. But floor is yours, Melva.
Yes. So, okay. We, on our podcast, we always, you know, have this final question. What have you been doing for fun? I mean, I know that there has been a lot of stress. So what have you been getting into? I can tell you that I have tried every face cream that is out there, because I figured that if I tried them at home, that if I broke out, then I could be at home and you won't have to really see me. So what are some things that some of the things I've always wanted to try it in the house? This is the time.
Well, Suzanne has been doing a Don't Rush challenge, who Hakeem Lucas decided not to show up. But he was, I want everybody in the room to hear that Hakeem Lucas said, I'm good. I don't want to do that.
Like, don't rush, right?
No,
so
he did.
What you guys been doing for fun?
Yeah. But we saw Suzanne rushing, so we know that's at least one thing.
I did say, I said, man down on that subject. I think, what have I been doing for fun? Do you know, so of course, everybody has been doing, whether it's Noom or JetFit. So I've been doing the JetFit app. I've been able to lose 10 pounds and to really exercise every day. Exercise every day. I even have regrown some hair. So I think I got the secret thing between shea butter and some other stuff I can't talk to you about. Throw a little milk thistle in there. But I've been able to regrow hair right in the front. So when y'all see me post-COVID, you're going to be like, who is that? Who is that man? Who is that man?
You better get
Suzanne, I'm sorry. You should have went first because Hakeem has shut it down. It's time for us to get our stuff and go right now.
He said, I'm going to get some edges in the coronavirus. I will have edges. Suzanne, what have you been for fun?
I mean, nothing compared to that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
right.
I was trying to find, I made some masks. I've been sewing clothes. That's just what I do.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
So sewing.
Yeah.
I've eaten myself into an oblivion. So I'm coming out of this all wrong. I'm upset. I was hoping I would have another restart, but I'm not ready.
Yeah.
However, Herman has been like doing all of the
Yeah,
weight
I am. You know, I've been talking to the people at Next Top Model, and you know, they're looking at your boy.
Thank you,
So
everybody. This was a great day. I appreciate Herman.
No, I've been on the other app that Hakeem was not on. I've been on Noom, and to date I've lost 20 pounds. So I'm back at my Marine Corps weight, my fighting weight, as they say. So suits fit a little different, got a little more stamina, but more importantly, I think I'm healthy. I feel a lot healthier. So it has been fun. It's taken over my life. I walk in the morning and the evenings and do a little exercising. So that's the fun that I've had, watching them pounds melt away. That's
I'm walking to the refrigerator and back, and
I'm running people off campus. Does that count as a hobby?
Yes, it does. It does. It does. So this has been the first of several conversations. The next couple of weeks, the Higher Education Leadership Foundation is really committed to making sure that the voice of our constituents are heard. COVID-19 has been dominating, and the voice that has dominated the response for higher education has not been HBCUs. We've done some extraordinary work. We banded together to do some extraordinary things. And we're really happy that the first conversation we had was centered around whether or not now's the time to reimagine the business model. And I cannot tell you how we got this right with two brilliant minds who are creative and innovative in themselves, in their own rights. And I believe that with leaders like you two, our institutions, individually and collectively, are ready to take a quantum leap on top of the leap that our predecessors made before us. So we're really grateful to have you all, and would like for you to share parting thoughts if you would be so kind. Suzanne, ladies first.
Oh, I thought I had time to think. My thoughts are back to what Dr. Lucas talked about. I mean, I think that as leaders, you have to be willing, we all have to be willing to take some significant risks right now. This is not the time to be afraid of trying new programs, of trying out a new business model. Get the right people around you to be able to create that business model. But I would just say this is the time that we absolutely have to rethink the business model, or we won't, you know, we really won't make it. So being fearless is critical, and having the right partners around you, and trusting and believing in your students, faculty, staff, alums, and your board. Because if you have that group around you, I think it makes it just a lot easier. And keep your eye on those students, because that's the reason we're all in this business. We all care about those students and making sure that they have a healthy and productive life.
I would like to say, thank you first to you, President Felton, and of course, soon to be President Williams. Thank you for your foresight in doing all this work. Of course, President Walsh, you're just an amazing mind, and just excited about continuing to watch you, and however I could be helpful, please let me know. But my last comments just go to everybody who's watching. Just thank you for joining into this dialogue. For those who work at Virginia Union who may be out there listening, I just thank you for what you're doing. I know that each of you have worked extremely hard, may feel overworked. Sometimes I may have driven too far and too hard and didn't give you the vacation that you need. Please take your vacation, because we got to start up again in June 1. So May is the month of vacation, but that's neither here nor there. But I just want to say, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this, to hear our thoughts. And anytime people make a decision, open their ears, their minds, and their hearts to something they haven't heard before, you can't help but be appreciative. So thank you. Keep praying for me. Keep praying for all of us. Keep praying for Virginia Union. Prayer does change things. Thank you, Pastor Rona. Pastor Rona, I appreciate you. I didn't like you when I first met you, but I've learned to love you, and I'm gonna make it through you. And I just thank God for what you brought to me. Bye-bye.
Suzanne, if you want to give a motivational message to the folks at Bennett, the floor is yours, because Hakeem he is a master. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, yeah, who knew that this was a time to have a public service announcement for the Virginia Union University folks? It's brilliant, right? No jokes aside, that's brilliant, brother.
Against the Virginia Union folks.
Yes.
Yeah, once he started going, I was like, wait, I want to thank people I didn't know.
Bells.
Thank you, Bells. I want to echo what Dr. Lucas said, and I could not be more appreciative or proud of the work that the Bennett College community has been putting forth. That's from our faculty, our staff, our alums, and our board. Everybody rallied. They rallied around our students. They made sure that every single one of our students had a place to go, that every single one of our students has been supported, and they've been supporting each other. And so I really appreciate it. I will not go into the long dissertation further after that, because I see the head shake. But I do hope that people get a little bit of that. People appreciate all the work that you do.
Thank you so much. We truly appreciate the both of you. And as Herman said, this is not the last. Tomorrow we have a double header, right? A double header tomorrow. Tomorrow is we have strategic planning and COVID-19 planning for battle with an invisible foe. And so on tomorrow's first webcast series will
only
be
one tomorrow. Only one. No, actually, you're right. There's two.
Dr. McCollum Abdullah of Virginia State University, Dr. Rosalind Clark-Artis of Benedict College, and Dr. Walter Kimbrough of Dillard University. That one is going to be tomorrow at 1 o'clock Central. So please join us back here, same time, same place. And then tomorrow evening, the doubleheader is tomorrow. We're having a good time tomorrow. We will have COVID-19 and the undergraduate students prism, a look at disruption and resilience. We're going to have some of the best SGA presidents there are out there. Traylon Rogers, SGA president of Dillard, Angelique Cooper, the SGA president of Wiley College, and Patrick Shaw, the SGA president at Southern University at New Orleans. So I'm excited to have them tomorrow. We're looking forward to it. So join us tomorrow for our double header. And but I do want to say one thing to my brother and fellow founder, Dr. Herman Felton. This was his idea, guys, and he is always so innovative and pushes us along. And I want to thank him for coming up with this fantastic idea. and to the other founders that could not be with us today, because they're still alive. They're just busy, so they're doing other stuff. But I sounded like I was making an announcement. But to Dr. Pinkard, he is traveling, so he is couldn't be on with us today. So he's the president of Wilberforce, and I think he's around the corner. Gregory D's around the corner. So thank you,
Over
guys.
here in the corner, always hiding. Yeah.
He's over
I
there.
want to thank you again for joining us. This is Four Thoughts of Our Founders, the podcast for Higher Education Leadership Foundation. We are forever indebted for Hakeem Lucas, president of Virginia Union University, and the incomparable Susan Walsh, president of Bennett College. We appreciate you. We are grateful for you. And as we part, as we always say here at the Higher Education Leadership Foundation, take some time out to join some damn loyalty programs. Go make the money work for yourself.
Right.
I'm just saying, I got miles. You need to get miles. You need to make the miles work for you.
Yes. And send some money to one of your favorite HBCUs,
There
right?
There you go. God bless you all.